All right, so we're diving into Dracula today. Clearly, you're not afraid of a little darkness.
Oh, Dracula. It never gets old. Such a classic, but more than just a scary story, you know? It's like a window into the Victorian era, all their fears and hang-ups.
Exactly. And the way Stoker just throws you right into the story. I mean, one minute you're reading about Jonathan Harker packing his bags, all organized with his travel journal and his pocket watch, very much a man of the modern world.
Right, right.
And the next, he's on that coach ride to Transylvania, and the atmosphere just gets thicker and thicker with every mile.
It's like the landscape itself is warning him. And those locals he meets, clutching their crucifixes, telling him stories about evil spirits.
And Harker, with his modern sensibilities, trying to rationalize it all, but you can practically feel the dread creeping in.
Oh, absolutely. And you have to remember, for a Victorian reader, Transylvania might as well have been another planet. This mysterious region in Eastern Europe, a melting pot of cultures and languages.
The Austro-Hungarian Empire, right?
Yeah, it was this big unknown, and that made it the perfect breeding ground for these Gothic anxieties. And Stoker, he knew how to play on those fears. The ancient castles, the dark forests, the whispers of the supernatural, all classic Gothic tropes, and he used them brilliantly to tap into this Victorian dread of the unknown.
It's like stepping into a nightmare that they couldn't quite wake up from.
Exactly.
And even from the beginning, like the first words Dracula utters to Harker, "About time. Welcome to the Carpathians. At 3 tomorrow, the diligence will start." Like he's saying your precious time means nothing here. Chilling.
Absolutely chilling. And that's how Stoker starts setting up Dracula, not just as a monster, but as something bigger, something that represents those deep-seated anxieties of the Victorian world.
So we talked about Transylvania, but what about Dracula himself? What makes him such an enduring villain even now?
He's fascinating, isn't he?
Yeah.
And it's not just because he's a vampire.
Right. It's like he's so much more than just a monster in the shadows.
Exactly. He's intelligent, charming, he's got that old world elegance, and he's a planner. Remember, he's buying property in London, shipping boxes of Transylvanian earth. He's even studying English etiquette.
Blending in.
Exactly, like he's trying to fit in almost.
Yeah.
Which makes him all the more terrifying. It's like Stoker's taking those Victorian anxieties about immigration, about social change, and giving them this face.
A face with fangs. And don't forget about the victims he chooses.
You're right, the women.
It's not random, is it? Why do you think he targets them specifically?
Well, you can't ignore the Victorian anxieties around female sexuality.
Right.
I mean, this was a society deeply uncomfortable with women who dared to be anything other than wives and mothers.
Right.
And here comes Dracula, with his hypnotic eyes and his promises of forbidden knowledge, this intoxicating mix of danger and, dare I say it, allure.
It's like he preys on those repressed desires, those anxieties about women stepping outside of what was considered proper.
Exactly. Think about Lucy and her sleepwalking. She's drawn to Dracula almost against her will. She's losing control. And that terrified Victorians, the idea of women succumbing to their darker impulses.
And it's not just about sexuality, is it? There's this whole fear of disease woven through the novel.
Oh, absolutely. The way Dracula feeds. The slow weakening of his victims, the paleness, the wasting away. It's like a mirror of tuberculosis, which was ravaging Victorian England at the time.
Consumption. It was this terrifying, invisible force.
Exactly. And Stoker uses those same images, those same fears with Dracula. Like he's this disease, this contagion infecting Victorian society at its very core. And it's interesting because the heroes, the ones fighting back, they're not just using crucifixes and garlic, they're using technology. Telegrams, trains, typewriters.
It's like Stoker showing us this clash, right? Between the old world and the new. Superstition versus reason.
Exactly. Think about Mina Harker, transcribing those phonograph recordings, using technology to track Dracula's movements. She's a modern woman fighting back against this ancient evil.
Using the tools of her time. I like that. And isn't that kind of the point Stoker's making, that to defeat the darkness, you need more than just faith? You need reason. You need to embrace those advancements. It's like a message for his time.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how these themes from Dracula, the fear of the other, disease, even technology, it's all still so relevant today.
So it makes it a timeless story. Right?
Yeah, like Stoker tapped into something so primal, so human. These fears, they change with the times.
They do. Those Victorian anxieties, they might seem a world away now, but deep down, it's still the same stuff, isn't it? That fear of the unknown, wanting to control things, that push and pull between our, well, darker impulses and wanting connection.
And needing someone to blame, to embody those fears. For them, it was Dracula. But it changes, doesn't it?
Always. Look at today. We've got globalization, Pandemics, technology moving faster than we can keep up, all these things we can't quite wrap our heads around.
So our Dracula now, it looks different.
Maybe. I mean, think about it. All those vampire stories still being told, but updated. There's a reason for that, right?
Because those anxieties are still there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Technology taking over, the world feeling smaller. Even disease, it's still a very real fear. Stoker was writing about consumption, and look at us now.
It's like we use these stories then and now as a way to, I don't know, to process it all.
Could be. It's safe, right? To explore the darkness, but in a controlled way. Maybe even find some comfort in knowing, hey, we're all scared together.
And in Dracula, even the line between good and evil, it's not so simple.
No, it's not. I mean, it accounts this monster, sure. But Stoker gives us these glimpses, the sadness, being alone for centuries,
Yeah.
wanting, maybe even needing that connection.
It makes you wonder, is he truly evil? Or just a being that's misunderstood, trying to survive the only way he knows how?
That's the question, isn't it? And that's what makes Dracula so great. It's not a simple answer. He's a monster, but maybe also tragic, maybe even, in a weird way, relatable.
Definitely makes you think. And that's what we're all about here. So to all our listeners, as you're reading, really pay attention to those details. The things that scare the characters, the stuff they're trying to understand. It might just give you a fresh perspective on the world today.
Exactly. And who knows? You might even find yourselves reloading to a centuries-old vampire.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but keep those questions coming. And until next time, happy reading.